On the 15th of February 2023, exactly at 0:10 at night, an emergency call comes in to the number 999. The crime scene is a house on Glenbrook Road, a quiet suburb where nothing unusual normally happens. The arriving patrol officers find two people in the kitchen: Kilua D, who had recently turned 9 years old, and his younger brother Sean D, who was only 6 years old. Both are lying unconscious. The medical team, acting quickly and methodically, desperately tries to save both. However, at 1:05, after 55 agonizingly long minutes, the doctors determined that the brothers could not be saved. The first diagnosis is brief and frighteningly indefinite: unknown toxic exposure. The investigators immediately begin work. The house's kitchen looks ordinary. Minimalist furniture, neat cleanliness, nothing suspicious except for one small but important element. On the table stand 3 cups in which traces of cocoa can be seen, the family's favorite evening drink. An ordinary glance registers nothing, but investigative practice requires in-depth examination of all suspicious details. Already on the morning of the next day, the CUH laboratory, equipped with the most modern equipment, confirms. Under the microscope, tiny, practically invisible particles of an unknown substance are discovered in the drink. What exactly the cups hide is the main question that keeps the investigation team in suspense. Additional information comes from the doorbell camera. Clearly visible is how at 18:15 that same evening, the neighbor Mary B, 66 years old, enters the house. In her hands, she carries a plate of homemade cookies. She remains in the house for 21 minutes and leaves again at 18:36. The video shows her obviously troubled. The woman is noticeably nervous, runs her hands through her hair, looks around as if she fears something. The first alarm in the house occurs considerably later at 21:10. Kilua and Sean begin complaining of sharp and strong abdominal pain. The mother, Anna D, 39 years old, reacts quickly and immediately calls the emergency line of the family doctor. The specialist advises giving them painkillers and observing them. Anna follows the recommendation. She gives each 250 milligrams of paracetamol and tries to calm both. However, there is no improvement. On the contrary, after 2 hours, the symptoms worsen drastically. At 23:05, the mother calls the doctor again, who this time recommends not waiting and immediately calling an ambulance. Meanwhile, the police are already working through a list of those who could be connected to the events. First to come under the investigators' scrutiny is the father, Patrick D, 43 years old. According to his own words and surveillance cameras, he leaves the house at 18:55 and goes to the night shift. The gatekeeper at Johnson Controls Company registers his car exactly at 1902. Verification of video recordings and confirmation from the shift supervisor make Patrick's alibi extremely reliable. Now all attention turns to Kilua and Sean's grandmother, Eleanor D, who is 74 years old. She is the only adult person who remains in the house after Patrick's departure. Neighbors describe her as a quiet, balanced woman, but investigators know that in such cases, first impressions rarely match reality. It was Eleanor who prepared the evening cocoa for the children, and it was she who could have noticed if something was wrong with the drink or cookies. Neighbor Mary B awakens first, and intense interest from the investigation team. Her obvious nervousness prompts police officers to ask her uncomfortable questions. Mary hurries to explain immediately that Kilua and Sean had poor tolerance for chocolate, and therefore the cookies she brought were dietary and safe. Her words are received with skepticism. However, examination of the cookie composition already in the morning confirms that they posed no threat. The neighbors' tension is, in the police's opinion, rather caused by shock over the terrible event in the neighboring house and not by her direct involvement. Exactly at the moment when medics determine an unknown toxic shock, the investigation team makes a key decision. The cups with drink remains are carefully sealed and immediately sent to the CUH laboratory for in-depth toxicological analysis. The report is expected in the morning, and the direction of the investigation will depend on it. The first 24 hours of investigation gave police a clear, but still incomplete picture of Patrick Dees, the father of Killua and Xi'an, whereabouts during his shift at Johnson Controls Company. The company's access system confirmed. He entered the premises at 19:02 in the evening and left exactly at 3:41 in the morning. But an oddity arose, a small gap that caught the eye and required explanation. From 1945 to 2030, Patrick had a grey interval noted. The shift was registered by the task tracking system. However, exactly in this time window, no progress was recorded. It was precisely this interval that interested investigators primarily. Checking the company's surveillance cameras in the cafeteria showed Patrick at 25 at the table having dinner. But key recordings from 2010 to 2025 were completely missing. The reason proved banal and official. At this time, the IT department was conducting an exchange of video surveillance hard drives. The corresponding maintenance protocol exists, and the procedure is documented. Another reason for questions was the shift supervisor's statement. The time card confirming Patrick's presence time at the workplace was signed by the supervisor at 3:50, 9 minutes after Patrick's departure. However, he told investigators directly that he had not seen Patrick from approximately 1930 to 2040. Such a statement, though cautious, immediately strengthened suspicions and prompted police to dig deeper in this direction. Patrick was quickly and discreetly summoned for questioning. His answer to the main question about the grey interval sounded simple and self-confident. "I was helping a colleague in the auto repair shop of Block C. Unfortunately, I left my phone at the communal table." The colleague named by Patrick actually confirmed that the father of Killua and Xi'an's mobile phone lay in the cafeteria during the specified interval and was not used. But Patrick himself could hardly remember the details of what he did with the colleague during these 45 minutes. This uncertainty proved significant. Police took an additional step and sent a team to study external surveillance cameras installed along major traffic arteries and objects nearby. The attention of Garda employees was drawn to a street camera at a gas station on road R610. At 2040, the video clearly showed a silver sedan that looked very similar to Patrick's car. But the important detail was that the car's license plate was completely obscured by rain and headlight glare from oncoming traffic. At this point, the version of Patrick's possible trip outside the work premises was only a hypothesis. The investigation could not ignore this coincidence. However, it remained an open question without firm confirmation at this stage. The car that looked like his could theoretically have belonged to any other person. But for investigators, any uncertainty was a critically important point for efforts. Department employees went specifically to the gas station and requested data on customer transactions for this period. Nevertheless, no transactions were registered that could definitively connect Patrick to the location. On the evening of the 16th of February at 22:50, the preliminary toxicological report from the CUH laboratory arrived. Patrick's analysis results proved completely clean of foreign substances, except for caffeine and paracetamol metabolites. No traces of the toxin with which Killua and Xi'an were poisoned were found in his organism. This significantly strengthened his position and partially reduced suspicions against Patrick. But police knew well that this was not yet proof of complete innocence. The question remained open. However, the focus of investigation began inevitably shifting to the family's closer circle, particularly to those who were directly in the house at the time of the first symptoms appearing in Killua and Xi'an. Now it is clear that details of Patrick's private life must be studied much more deeply. A quiet, silent man, responsible worker who never had complaints from management. In his personnel file are 0 disciplinary measures, steady work path. Colleagues describe him as a taciturn, reserved man who avoids superfluous conversations and social contacts. The fact that his phone remained at the communal table in the cafeteria easily fit such a personality characteristic. However, at the critical moment, the disappearing recordings and witness statements about the unaccounted 45 minutes presented a reason for more careful investigation of this person. The deeper the investigation delved into Patrick's personality, the clearer it became that the simple, seemingly calm and responsible image of a person contains much more nuances and dark areas that are yet to be investigated. On the 17th of February 2023, the investigation directs its attention to Eleanor D., the 74-year-old grandmother of Kilua and Sion. In her financial history, unexpected and strange expenses are discovered. Large cash amounts, 1,200 euros in January and another 1,800 euros in early February. Eleanor herself, without hiding these expenses, shared with relatives the purchase of a new sofa. Checking the family apartment does not confirm this version. No furniture was added. The police officer's attention falls on a specific store, Greenleaf, which specializes in ecological goods. According to the records of the internal journal, a strange purchase was made here on the 12th of February. A woman with the initials ED bought organic granules for rodents. The record is accompanied by a signature and the last 4 digits of the bank card, which completely match Eleanor's card data. The questioned cashier remembered the buyer well and immediately identified her from the photo. The cashier remembered the unusual conversation in detail. The woman asked very politely and calmly what exact dosage of the granules would be safe for domestic birds. Such a detail immediately aroused logical interest among the investigators. What birds exactly could Eleanor have meant, and why did she choose such a specific product? The investigation operatively conducts a conversation with the mother of Kilua and Sion, Anna D., 39 years old. Anna tells the police that she is aware of her mother-in-law's specific phobia. Eleanor had panic fear of rodents. However, Anna firmly explains that she had never noticed a single rodent either in the house itself or in the adjacent utility rooms. The forensic examination inspects and carefully documents the attic and basement of the house. The search for traces of rodents, whether nests or excrement, ends in complete failure. The attic and basement are absolutely clean and show no signs of pest presence. Eleanor's phobia remains an explanation for her actions for now, but loses connection to objective facts. Simultaneously with Eleanor's verification, another version emerges that temporarily occupies the investigation. Documents of an insurance policy in the names of Kilua and Sion are found in the house. The policy was concluded comparatively recently, which immediately raised suspicions regarding the mother, Anna D. The hypothesis arose that she could have used the cookies brought by neighbor Mary as a poisoning instrument. However, the conducted criminalistic examination, using liquid chromatography with mass spectrometry, quickly clears up all questions. The cookies delivered by Mary are absolutely clean of toxic substances. Analysis of the door intercom video also confirms that the neighbor left the house long before the first symptoms appeared. Thus, the cookies from Anna version is officially excluded by the investigation. Meanwhile, during the thorough house inspection, a seemingly insignificant object draws the criminalists' attention: household scissors. However, under the microscope, small green inclusions of unknown origin are discovered on the scissors blades. The substance is so tiny that without laboratory analysis, it is impossible to understand exactly what these scissors were used for. The scissors are immediately sent for detailed analysis using high-performance liquid chromatography. The results of this examination could become the key to solving the entire chain of events. The morning of the 18th of February 2023 begins with the arrival of the report from the Garda H PLC laboratory. The analysis is extremely precise. The green microcrystals discovered on the household scissors and in the cups belong to the industrial rodenticide Antico with the active ingredient Brodifacoum 0.005%. Now the poison that caused the tragedy with Kilua and Sion is officially established. The key detail of the report sharply narrows the circle of suspects. Toxic particles were found only in 2 cups, those intended for Kilua and Sion. The third cup that stood on the table and was used by an adult person proved to be completely clean. Soon the investigators receive additional confirmation of Eleanor's guilt. The warehouse worker from Greenleaf store recognizes her clearly and without doubt from the photo and confirms the sale of a 500-gram package of Antico to her. He remembered this moment not only because the product is specific, but also because the buyer showed increased interest in the safety of using the substance in the household near animals. Toward evening of the same day, Eleanor is brought to the police station for questioning. Without accompaniment of a lawyer, she appears calm and answers the investigation's questions reservedly and clearly. To the evidence presented to her, the scissors with discovered microcrystals of poison, Eleanor responds simply and without excessive emotions. She claims to have used them exclusively for household purposes, particularly to cut threads for knitting. However, the criminalist present at the conversation explains that the character of the traces on the scissors blades completely corresponds to opening precisely a vacuum bag with rodenticide. The expert emphasizes that household items do not leave similar traces. This is a clear technical marker of working with packaging of a specific type. Eleanor's position becomes increasingly shaky. The investigation methodically continues to present her with the discovered facts, including the testimony from Greenleaf and the laboratory data. Parallel to this, during repeated house inspection, investigators discover in Kilua and Sian's bedroom an empty package of the medication Zolpidem with a dosage of 10 milligrams. This discovery raises the assumption that a combined effect of two preparations could have taken place. However, there are no direct confirmations of this scenario, and this hypothesis remains without definitive conclusion for now. After several hours of conversation, against the background of increasing evidentiary pressure, Eleanor agrees to sign a brief confession. In it, she states that she personally bought Antico and introduced it herself into Kilua and Sian's drinks. However, her confession is dry and lacks any explanations for the reasons of her act. But after a few minutes, Eleanor drastically changes her position. She tells the investigator that she withdraws her confession, retracts her previous words, and insists on the provision of a lawyer. The investigation is forced to immediately end the conversation and postpone the continuation of the interrogation until the morning of the next day. On the 22nd of April 2024, the Central Criminal Court in Dublin announces the verdict in the case of Eleanor D. and puts a final point in one of the most disturbing cases of recent years. More than a year after the tragic events on Glenbrook Road, the investigation establishes with absolute precision every step of the crime committed by this previously unremarkable 75-year-old woman. Eleanor D. is found guilty on 2 counts of premeditated murder with particular cruelty. The carefully conducted investigation and court proceedings establish the details of the crime's preparation and commission down to the smallest particulars. According to court documents, the crime began long before the 15th of February 2023. On the 12th of February, Eleanor visited the specialty store Greenleaf and made the purchase of 500 grams of industrial rodenticide Antico, containing the highly toxic substance brodifacoum in a concentration of 0.005%. Payment was made with her bank card, which POS protocols and the store's video surveillance recordings confirmed. Later, at home, Eleanor carefully opened the vacuum bag with the toxic substance using ordinary kitchen scissors. Technical examination confirmed that the character of the microtraces on the scissors corresponds exactly to such opening of the packaging. On the day of the crime, Eleanor purposefully added approximately 1 gram of this powder to the cocoa cups intended for Kilua and Sian. The poison concentration in the cups, according to HPLC laboratory data, was 1.05 milligrams per milliliter of liquid, which exceeded the threshold of lethal dosage for the age and weight of both victims by multiple times. The involvement of other persons in the crime is completely excluded. The detailed verification of Patrick D.'s schedule, the father of Kilua and Sian, confirmed that he was at his workplace at the time of the crime's commission. The company Johnson Controls provided the investigation with technical server logs and video recordings from the company cafeteria, which convincingly proved that Patrick had not left the company premises for a single minute. The previously occurred 54-minute gray interval was a technical error and did not mean the employee's absence from the workplace. Additionally, the assumption that Patrick could have used the car and left the company was definitively closed. The car registered on Street R610, which resembled Patrick's limousine, turned out to be a Hyundai i40 taxi, whose ownership was fully confirmed by employees of the Garda Vehicle Registration Office. Thus, the version of Patrick's involvement in the events of that evening was completely and officially excluded. Another closed false lead was the discovery of an empty blister pack of the drug Zolpidem in the house. The conducted examination confirmed the complete absence of this substance in the organisms of Kilua and Sean. Furthermore, the blister pack had expired several years ago and could have no connection to the committed crime. The most discussed moment of the court's final session was the behavior of the accused herself. Eleanor behaved extraordinarily restrainedly. Without visible emotion, she perceived all stages of the court proceedings. At the moment of the verdict announcement, she briefly and coldly informed the court that she considers the verdict quite just and logical, taking her age into account. The judge refused to comment on this statement and only noted the formality of the sentence execution. The court established the motive of the crime and uncovered the long internal conflict within the D family. Eleanor acted from the desire to completely destroy her son Patrick's motive to sell the family house, which would have meant her relocation to a nursing home. Investigation and court do not doubt that precisely the fear of losing the house and familiar life pushed Eleanor to such extreme measures. Since the moment of the official verdict announcement, the case received the official inventory number 34 Dublin and was closed with transfer to the Central Archive. The investigation exhausted all possible questions and uncertainties and reconstructed the course of events down to the minute. At the beginning of summer, students throughout Great Britain eagerly awaited the end of the school year and the start of holidays. Among them was Danielle Jones from East Tilbury in Essex County. On the morning of the 18th of June 2001, Danielle prepared for school as usual. Around 7:55, she said goodbye to her family and set off for the bus stop to catch the school bus. At 14:30, the phone rang in the Jones family house. On the other end of the line was Danielle's teacher, inquiring why she had been absent from class. This question hit Danielle's parents like a bolt from the blue. They could not understand why their daughter had not appeared at school. She had no reason to miss class. Daniela Sarah Jones was born in autumn 1985 in Essex County. Her parents, Linda and Tony Jones, lived together with Daniela and her two younger brothers in the small village of East Tilbury. Daniela was rather reserved, preferred the comfort of home, and was sometimes shy in the presence of other people. Nevertheless, she possessed an excellent sense of humor and had many friends. Most of all, Daniela loved animals. At home, she had two small, fluffy rabbits that she adored above everything. When Daniela's parents received a call from school, this news deeply troubled them. They thought that even if their daughter had decided to skip class, she would certainly come home before dark. After all, Daniela had always been afraid of being alone at night. Throughout the day, Daniela's relatives and friends tried to reach her. They wrote messages and called her, but there was only silence. This behavior did not fit Daniela at all, which worried everyone even more. Danielle's story left many questions unanswered. She always kept her parents informed about her plans, even if she just wanted to visit the neighbors. Usually she called home as soon as she reached her destination. When it got dark and Danielle was still not back, her relatives became restless and decided to begin searching. Linda Jones stayed at home, hoping for a call or her daughter's return. Around midnight, when it became clear that something must have happened to Danielle, the parents turned to the authorities for help. The investigators first questioned the missing person's environment. After it was established that Danielle had no reason to leave the house and all her things were still in place, it was decided to begin searching immediately. Danielle's younger brother shared a strange observation. In the morning, he had seen through the window how his sister left the house and took the usual path, but then suddenly turned around and went in another direction. This seemed unusual to him. The search operation was launched in full scope. Investigators, dog handlers with tracking dogs, relatives and friends set off along Danielle's usual route that she normally took to school. The mother barely closed her eyes all night. She waited for her daughter to come through the door any moment as usual. Over the next 3 days, the family searched every corner of the house, but found nothing significant. However, they managed to find people who had seen the missing person that morning. A couple of students noticed how she went to the store next to the bus stop. It turned out that she never got on the school bus. Soon, the search operations expanded. The police went from house to house in the small town. The investigators spoke with all residents and asked them to check their sheds and outbuildings. At the same time, the response from society was overwhelming. Everyone tried to support the family, and many locals participated in the search themselves. But even after several days of intensive searching, no traces could be found. The relatives and close ones of the missing person were desperate. Nevertheless, they continued to believe that their beloved daughter was alive and would soon return home. The local law enforcement officers recognized the seriousness of the situation regarding missing Danielle and handed the case over to the Central Investigation Team. They assigned a special officer as a liaison to the family. His task was to support the relatives throughout the entire investigation and inform them promptly of new information. The officer was to build a trusting relationship with Danielle's relatives in order to better understand the atmosphere in the family and create a profile of the missing person. During the conversation, the parents expressed concerns regarding their daughter's interaction with her uncle. Stuart Campbell, the husband of Tony Jones's sister, was close to Danielle. This 43-year-old construction worker and father of 2 children often spent time with his niece and her brothers when they were younger. He played with them and treated them like his own children. In conversation with an investigator, Mrs. Jones shared her observations about Stuart. According to her words, he gave the impression of a person with excessive self-esteem, although he also possessed a certain charisma. Her husband Tony maintained a friendly relationship with him, but occasionally confessed to his wife that there was something about Stuart that triggered a vague uneasiness in him. Over time, Stuart began paying increased attention to Daniela, his niece. He got into the habit of picking her up after class and offering her a ride. This caused Daniela discomfort, especially due to the curious looks of her classmates. Stuart frequently invited her to the cinema and cafe and persistently tried to hold her hand during walks. Stuart's visits to the Jones family house became too frequent, up to 4 or 5 times per week. Finally, Linda and Tony decided to limit his stay with them. Tony remembered an incident when Stuart, sitting next to Daniela on the sofa, persistently asked why she was so embarrassed and blushing. When Tony heard this conversation, he decided to intervene and asked Stuart what was wrong. Campbell, however, immediately waved it off, explained that everything was fine, and immediately moved to sit elsewhere. After the conversation with the authority representative, Danielle's parents shared that only now they were beginning to understand. There might be more behind Stuart's behavior than the usual relationship between uncle and niece. It seemed as if Danielle had tried to stay away from him. Linda and Tony admitted that they had previously explained his actions with sincere affection and the desire to be closer to their family, and everything that seemed strange to them they attributed to harmless misunderstandings. They tried not to pay too much attention to it, fearing that it could seriously harm family relationships if their suspicions proved unfounded. After all, Tony's biological sister was Stuart's wife. One day, after Danielle stopped responding, Tony decided to visit his relative. However, the house greeted him with silence. When he looked through the window, he surprisingly noticed a video surveillance system in the living room, which seemed unusual to him. Even stranger, however, was Stuart Campbell's behavior when Tony finally encountered him. He seemed completely indifferent to Danielle's disappearance. Moreover, Stuart was the only one who showed no interest in searching for her. At the same time, local media continued to report intensively on Danielle Jones' disappearance. Given the growing public interest, representatives of law enforcement decided to organize a meeting with journalists to provide official information about the case. At a meeting with journalists, investigators shared details about how Danielle had disappeared. They asked viewers of local news to report any information that could help with the search. This step proved successful. Numerous calls began coming into the police station. One of them particularly interested the investigators. An eyewitness reported that on the morning when Danielle was last seen, he had noticed a similarly looking girl. She was standing next to a blue delivery van and arguing loudly with a man. Interestingly, Danielle's uncle, Stuart Campbell, owned a similar blue delivery van. This detail aroused serious suspicions among the police. Fears arose that Campbell might have abducted his niece in an unknown direction. Before the investigators invited the suspicious person for questioning, they decided to examine their past. What they discovered caused them great concern. It turned out that this person had attracted the attention of law enforcement many years ago. In the late 80s, they were arrested for inappropriate behavior toward a young person. They confessed their guilt but got away with a suspended sentence and left the courtroom as a free person. Both Linda and Tony knew that their new relative had problems with the law in the past, but when they tried to find out details, Stuart dismissed it and assured them it had been trivial matters. He convinced everyone that he had become a victim of slander, since the court had ultimately acquitted him. Further investigation led to shocking revelations. The police uncovered about 30 cases in which Stuart Campbell's name appeared. It turned out that over many years he had lured young women to him by posing as a trendy photographer. Once he was alone with them, he forced them to participate in questionable photo shoots and claimed they were shots for glossy magazines. Given Campbell's past and his unusual relationship with the missing Danielle, investigators had to either clear suspicion against him or find evidence of his possible involvement in his niece's mysterious disappearance. Since Danielle could not be found, investigators developed the theory that Stuart Campbell might possibly be holding her against her will at an unknown location. They organized surveillance, hoping he would lead them to the missing person's whereabouts. However, his behavior only intensified law enforcement's suspicions. He did not show the concern one would expect from an uncle whose niece had disappeared without a trace. Instead, Campbell strangely spent time in parking lots, photographing cars that resembled his own silver Nissan. When it became clear that surveillance was not bringing the desired results, investigators decided to arrest Campbell. On the 23rd of June, 5 days after Danielle Jones's disappearance, Stuart Campbell was taken into custody. During questioning by investigators, Campbell was immediately made clear that they had solid reasons to believe he was aware of the situation with Danielle. However, Stuart immediately began denying everything and claimed to have no idea where she was. Furthermore, he insisted he had a close and trusting relationship with his niece. According to Stuart, Danielle's relationships with her parents, Tony and Linda Jones, had deteriorated as she got older. He told them that he acted as a mediator between Danielle and her parents to help the Jones family avoid a break, since according to his statement, they were on the verge of falling apart. During the conversation, it emerged that Stuart Campbell had a watertight alibi. At the time of Danielle's disappearance, he was not in East Tilborough. He had driven to a neighboring town to get building materials to help his neighbor with renovation work. He had no receipt since that store did not have the needed goods. On the way back, he stopped to call his wife and tell her this. After returning home, he immediately went to his neighbor to continue with the renovation work. The story with Daniella Jones's case left many questions unanswered. Despite Campbell's questionable alibis, law enforcement could not find sufficient grounds for his continued detention. He was released on bail until the completion of investigations. Given Campbell's past, the prospect of his release caused investigators considerable concern. They suspected he could pose a danger but had no solid evidence to file charges. In this context, it was decided to search the Jones family house again. When searching Daniella's room, they found a pencil case with 2 notes. The first read, "Hello, Princess. In case you didn't notice my previous messages, I decided to leave another one. I want you to know, I miss your smile. Kisses." When investigators showed these notes to Linda Jones, she was shocked and stated she was seeing them for the first time. She told them that the entire Jones family had gone on vacation several weeks before Daniela's mysterious disappearance. Linda suspected that Stuart might have broken into Daniela's room in their absence and left these messages. Daniela's father remembered an important detail. Before their departure, Campbell had installed a new back door in their house. Suspicion arose that he could have made himself a spare key for the new door at precisely that time. The investigations led to the necessity of examining the Stuart Campbell family house. After obtaining appropriate permission, investigators began inspection. A variety of photographic equipment was discovered in the house, which in itself did not arouse suspicion. However, the findings took a disturbing turn. Among Campbell's personal belongings were pictures that caused concern. The photographs of young people were inappropriate in nature and seemed to have been taken with the homeowner's own camera. Additionally, pictures of similar content were found that had been downloaded from the internet. The most disturbing discoveries awaited investigators in the attic. In a double bag were objects that gave cause for unpleasant thoughts: underwear, restraint devices, and adult toys. Particular attention was drawn to a pair of white stockings with barely visible traces that were sent for further examination. During the inspection, a blue delivery van belonging to Campbell was also confiscated. Stuart Campbell claimed he had information that Danielle had not disappeared, but had decided herself to leave the house due to constant disagreements between her parents. To confirm his statement, he presented investigators with a message allegedly received from Danielle's number on the day of her disappearance. It read, "Hello, Stu. Thank you. You are forever the best uncle. Tell Mama I'm so sorry." This information gave Danielle's parents hope that their daughter was hiding somewhere. However, they were extremely troubled that she had not contacted them until now and had not returned. A text analysis specialist examined the alleged message from Danielle. He found that it was written in capital letters, although Danielle normally used lowercase letters. Investigators requested data from Campbell's mobile service provider. It turned out that the call Campbell allegedly made to his wife when he returned from the hardware store on the day of Danielle's disappearance was made from Eastleborough and not from where Campbell claimed to have been. But the most remarkable thing was that signals from Campbell's and Danielle Jones's mobile devices were located near Campbell's house and remained active for 30 more hours after her disappearance. 30 days after Danielle Jones had broken contact, her concerned relatives turned to the public through the media. They hoped to find new clues and any information that could shed light on the matter. The family called on everyone who might know something or might have seen Danielle, but for some reason had not yet reported this to the authorities to finally share the information known to them. After some time, Jones's relatives, together with law enforcement representatives, distributed about 1,500 flyers with photos of Danielle. Simultaneously, investigators received the results of examination of the white stockings found in Stuart Campbell's attic. The experts' conclusions were disturbing. Traces were found on the clothing item that were connected to both Campbell and Danielle Jones. Based on the collected data, Stuart Campbell was taken into custody without the possibility of release on bail. He was brought to the station where he was charged with possession of inappropriate images. However, this charge served only as a formal reason for the arrest and allowed investigators to continue the investigation and prepare more serious charges related to the disappearance of Danielle Jones. A relative of the suspect visited him shortly after his arrest. After a conversation with him, the relative informed law enforcement that he was deeply convinced that the arrested person was telling lies. It also turned out that the suspect kept records that investigators would later call the missing person's diary. He noted there every interaction with her, whether it was a call or a sent message. These records made it clear that he was excessively fascinated by her. Despite the lack of clear evidence for the disappearance, investigators had gathered enough indications to bring charges of involvement in the mysterious disappearance. After the charges were filed, the suspect remained under surveillance by law enforcement for almost a year. During this time, More than 500 reports came in from all over Great Britain and Europe, stating that the missing person was allegedly well. This created considerable difficulties for local police, as each of these reports required thorough verification. Had there been even the slightest possibility that she was still somewhere and this report had gone unnoticed, this could have been a significant argument for Campbell's lawyers in court. In the months before the trial began, efforts to find Danielle were significantly intensified. It was not only about finding key evidence for the investigation, but also about providing her relatives with the much-needed spiritual comfort. 12 days before the start of Campbell's trial, human remains were discovered. Investigators determined that they belonged to the missing student named Millie Dowler. As it later turned out, a certain Levi Belfield was involved in her disappearance. He would have to answer for his actions a whole decade after the discovery of Millie's remains. On the 14th of October 2002, the trial against Stuart Campbell began, the man who was married to the sister of Danielle's father. Linda and Tony Jones trusted him. He presented himself as a caring relative. Stuart Campbell's story raised numerous questions. He was accused of a serious offense against Danielle Jones. However, Campbell appeared confident and unworried in the face of the charges brought, as he knew that Danielle had not been found. Investigators suspected that Campbell secretly communicated with Danielle without informing Tony and Linda. It seemed as if he had been very fascinated by her and had tried to sow discord between the girl and her parents. Danielle was last seen talking to someone in a blue delivery van that resembled Campbell's vehicle. On Campbell's attic, a pair of white stockings with his and Danielle's DNA was found. His personal records revealed an unhealthy interest in young people. An important piece of evidence were messages allegedly sent by Danielle. An investigation revealed that Campbell himself was the author and was trying to mislead the investigation. Mobile service provider data refuted his alibi. Throughout the entire court proceedings, Campbell maintained silence. He only occasionally passed notes to his defenders when something did not suit him. After almost 3 months of proceedings, the jury delivered their verdict. Stuart Campbell was found guilty and sentenced to a long prison term, with the possibility of review after 20 years. Until 2019, the whereabouts of Danielle Jones remained unknown. Linda Jones supported an initiative in memory of Helen McCourt, whose fate took a tragic turn. This proposal was meant to restrict the rights of those who withhold important information from investigators. Helen worked at an insurance company when her life came to an abrupt end in 1988. Ian Sims, the man who was connected to her disappearance, never revealed all circumstances of the case. The call for passing a new law collected over 100,000 signatures and found support at the highest government level. In the year 2021, a book titled My Relative with a Dark Past saw the light of day, whose author was Alex Sharkey, Stuart Campbell's brother. In this work, Alex openly shared the story of his life alongside his brother and described in detail the events that followed the mysterious disappearance of Danielle Jones. When 2 decades had passed since Danielle's disappearance, Essex law enforcement organized a memorial event in her honor. Investigators assured Danielle's relatives that they would not give up hope and would continue the search so that the family could find peace and close this sad chapter of their lives. Many believe that in the environment of other people, one is protected by public attention. Statistics confirm this theory. However, one should not forget that perpetrators can use various tricks to lure someone to a lonely place. Therefore, it is important to remain vigilant, even in busy places. In picturesque Andria, an Italian city with about 100,000 inhabitants, the story of the local Mansi family attracted public attention. The city was famous for its historical heritage, especially for the majestic castle Castel del Monte, which daily attracted many travelers. For the locals, tourism became the main source of income. Not far from the famous castle lived the Mansi family, the parents and their only long-awaited daughter, Graziella. For the last 10 years, the family owned a small trading shop that was conveniently located on the path to the main gate of the castle. Here they offered tourists nuts and dried fruits. The business was successful. Graziella often helped in the family business despite her age, which greatly pleased her parents. On the busy tourist street, there were always many visitors, and additional hands were very welcome. The young woman participated with joy in the common business and attracted customers through her friendliness and energy. Saturday, the 19th of August 2000, did not differ from ordinary weekends with their maximum tourist influx. On such days, Graziella's grandfather often stood behind the counter. The granddaughter gladly kept him company and carried out small tasks. Because of the constant stream of visitors, the grandfather could rarely leave the shop. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, the elderly man who had become tired asked his granddaughter to go to the fountain and fill a small bottle with water. Graziella willingly agreed and set off toward the fountain, which was only 5 minutes away. Time passed, but Graziella did not return. The grandfather began to worry, although he initially calmed himself with the thought that his granddaughter might have met acquaintances and gotten into conversation. However, when more than 20 minutes had passed and Graziella, who was always punctual, did not appear, the man became seriously concerned. He decided to check the situation and went to the fountain. To his surprise and concern, Graziella was neither there nor in the neighboring streets, which he thoroughly walked while searching for his granddaughter. The situation became increasingly tense. When the grandfather returned to the shop hoping to find Graziella, he discovered that she still had not appeared. She could have taken another path, but she was nowhere to be seen. After about 30 minutes, he made contact with his son and the mother, began calling all friends and acquaintances whose numbers he had noted. The parents also called everyone they could reach, but no one had seen her. Soon the entire family and some of Graziella's friends gathered at the Mansi shop on the square. Without losing time, adults and teenagers organized search groups. Their activity attracted the attention of passers-by and tourists, many of whom immediately joined the search. The relatives brought a photo of Graziella and showed it to people passing by. Some confirmed having seen her during the day and evening. However, no one could say where she had gone or what might have happened. The area was considered quiet. Incidents rarely occurred here. It seemed unimaginable that something could happen in such a busy place. After several hours of unsuccessful searching, the Mansi family turned to the local police. The officers immediately joined the search. After some time, a local resident approached one of the patrol officers with disturbing information. He had heard a scream from the wooded area near Castel del Monte Castle. 2 carabinieri headed in the indicated direction and noticed smoke rising from the center of the plantation. Initially, they did not connect this with the disappearance, but decided to check the source of the fire and assess the need for fire department intervention. As they approached the location to about 10 meters, the police officers perceived an unusual smell. The source of the fire looked strange. Under a layer of dry leaves, they noticed something alarming. Due to the size and clothing that matched the description of Graziella's outfit, the police officers had to recognize with heavy hearts that their worst assumptions had been confirmed. When they discovered the crime scene, it was already too late to change anything. During the examination of the forest area, investigators discovered several fragments of clothing and a device for fire ignition, the suspected source of the fire. No further clues about the perpetrators were found. A more thorough examination of the terrain was required. The authorities also hoped to obtain recordings from surveillance cameras that were installed near the castle. The medical examination confirmed the identity of the found person. It was Graziella Mansi. The specialists could not exhaustively answer all questions of the investigation and the family. The condition complicated the examination. However, the expert opinion confirmed the intentional character of the incident. Information about this incident spread lightning fast through news channels. The next day, press representatives literally besieged the Mansi family house. When the relatives were informed about what had happened, they initially refused to believe that it was Graziella. This inexplicable case shook the residents so much that the entire district was in a state of shock. The media reported intensively about the incident near the famous castle. Society was disturbed by what had happened. The tourist flow declined significantly. Visitors considered the area unsafe and avoided the attraction, which negatively affected Andria's tourism sector. The investigators acted quickly. The police actively engaged in the work from the first hours. The main version was that a perpetrator led Graciela from the walking path to a deserted place and subsequently set a fire to erase traces. Obviously, there could be no serious adversaries in Graciela's environment, therefore they searched for an adult person. The investigation pursued several versions. First, they checked lists of people with criminal backgrounds who could be in the region. However, this line of investigation gradually lost importance. They even examined tourist data. It was suspected that the perpetrator could be a traveler who selected random passers-by. With time, this version also appeared increasingly unlikely. During the questioning of witnesses, friends, and acquaintances of the Mansi family, the name Pasquale Tartoro was mentioned more and more frequently. This 20-year-old young man was known throughout the entire area. He worked unofficially as a parking attendant on the street where the Mansi family shop was located. Many noticed Pasquale's strange behavior. Since Graziella helped in her relative's shop, he constantly observed her. His gaze disturbed the surroundings. Several witnesses pointed to this circumstance, which attracted the special attention of investigators. The authorities' conversations with Pasquale's friends confirmed the disturbing suspicions. The question arose: could Pasquale be an obsessed stalker? The relatives categorically rejected this possibility. According to their words, he grew up in a well-protected family and never came into conflict with the law. At least until that fateful evening at Castel del Monte. Despite his relatives' assurances, however, Pasquale became the main person of the case. During the meeting with investigators, the suspicions only intensified. His t-shirt was stained with suspicious dark red spots and dirt, as if he had been digging in the ground for a long time. Traces of resistance were visible on his face. The investigators noted that the scratches were superficial, as if they had been left by delicate fingers. Pasquale denied his involvement in the disappearance of a person, but the longer the conversations with investigators lasted, the more frequently his version of events changed. After several hours at the police station, Pasquale began to give in. His statement about Graziella's beauty particularly concerned the investigators. This is how he spoke about the student. Many inconsistencies accumulated in the suspect's stories, who obviously tried to hide something from the police. In one version, Pasquale claimed he was accidentally in that forest during a walk, where he saw a motionless person. Out of fear, he ran away, and shortly after the police appeared. Later, his story was supplemented with new details. He told how he met Graziella at the well, where she had come to fetch water. She was not afraid of him, had often seen him before. Until that day, he always appeared calm and appropriate. Pasquale confessed that he lured her into the forest with a story about puppies that had allegedly recently been born to a local dog. When he was finally caught, he confessed to the incident and claimed he wanted to cover up the traces. The young man insisted that there were no other motives and described what happened as a game that got out of control. The media actively illuminated every detail of the incident, adding rumors and unverified particulars. This created confusion. The true motives of the perpetrator remained unclear. The story with Pasquale's statements took an unexpected turn. Law enforcement tried to obtain a credible version of events. There were many inconsistencies in his story, obvious contradictions to the evidence found. Although he shared the details of events and other important information with the Carabinieri, many key questions about the incident and its causes remained unanswered. It was established that the fire began around 22 o'clock, but the disappearance was noticed almost 3 hours earlier. What happened during all this time? Pasquale explained his actions by saying he heard voices. Near the forest, people were passing by. He thought the search for the missing person had begun. The medical expert's opinion caused particular concern. In his opinion, Graziella Mansi was conscious at the time of the fire. The Carabinieri continued working with the suspect. Questions arose as to why he had only insignificant scratches under these circumstances. Doubts arose that he acted alone. Possibly there were other participants as well. It was decided to conduct another interrogation. Finally, Pasquale agreed to cooperate with the investigators and tell the truth he had previously concealed out of fear. According to his words, he did not bring Graziella to the forest on his own initiative. A group of young men aged 18 to 20 forced him to do so. In the forest, Giuseppe Di Bari, Vincenzo Caratello, Domenico Margiotto, and Michele Zagaria were waiting. Pasquale claimed that originally there were no other intentions. He had a conflict with these young men, in which he lost. As compensation, the acquaintances demanded that Graziella be brought to the forest, which he did. The four young men held Graziella for several hours. When they heard the search calls, they became afraid of the consequences. The group decided to hide the traces of the incident. They had no suitable materials to cover up the evidence. When Graziella regained consciousness and began to scream, the young men panicked and tried to use violence. Finally, they covered her with leaves and tried to think about how they could hide their actions, after which they decided to use an ignition device. All participants were between 18 and 20 years old. As it turned out, the young men came from wealthy families and not from a problematic environment, which made their act even more incomprehensible. Acquaintances described them as balanced and reasonable young people who had never shown aggression or a tendency toward legal violations. Only one of them had small problems with the law in the past, a minor theft. Following Pasquale's statements, law enforcement quickly arrested the entire group. The news shocked all of Italy and received broad media attention. Since their arrest, the suspects denied any involvement in Graziella's disappearance and maintained they did not understand the reasons for the authorities' interest in them. However, investigators were determined to continue their work until they reconstructed the complete picture of the events of that evening in the forest. When examining these young men, investigators, unlike with Pasquale, found no visible traces of the incident. Their clothing was clean, and they showed no injuries. Searches of their apartments brought no results. Nothing suspicious was found. During interrogations, they stubbornly insisted on their innocence, but confirmed that Pasquale Tartoro indeed harbored strange feelings for Graziella. Despite long conversations with investigators, none of them changed their statement. At this point, they were released but remained under observation as suspects. An interesting detail came to light later. These four young men were among those who carried the ceremonial coffin at Graziella's farewell. This happened before Pasquale made his statement. Eyewitnesses reported that the young men showed sincere emotions, as if they felt deep sorrow. During interrogations, they explained their reaction by saying they knew Graziella, not closely, but they often saw her in the Mansi family business. The investigators developed the theory that the presence of all four at the ceremony was not coincidental. Despite lacking close acquaintance with the family, they might have felt inner discomfort or tried to understand how far the investigation had progressed and whether there were suspicions against them. The ceremony gathered almost the entire town. Even some tourists came. In such a crowd, four emotional young men did not attract particular attention. When they were again asked to come to the station, each was spoken to individually. Vincenzo and Giuseppe claimed to have an alibi. They explained that they were at the local gaming club around 7 o'clock on the day of the disappearance. Michele and Domenico, however, refused to speak with investigators and demanded the presence of lawyers. This behavior only intensified law enforcement interest in these persons. Investigators began checking Vincenzo and Giuseppe's alibi. At the computer club, their presence was confirmed, but only for the first hour. The further whereabouts of the friends remained unknown, which raised questions among investigative authorities. The case took an unexpected turn when Michele and Domenico decided to tell their version of events. Their story largely matched Pasquale Tartoro's statements. According to their words, the friends met in the forest in the evening, allegedly for a game. By the time of their arrival, the entire group was already on site. Pasquale was supposed to bring Graziella. The other participants hid behind trees and waited for their appearance. It took them about 15 to 20 minutes to reach the forest. By this time, the grandfather had presumably already begun searching for his granddaughter. When they arrived at the location, the other participants jumped out of their hiding places. Graziella was trapped. The group was under the influence of alcohol. They amused themselves with how frightened Graziella was. According to the arrested person's statements, they only wanted to play with the defenseless Graziella. Graziella was so frightened that she froze in terror. At one moment, the situation got out of control. After the fall, she lost consciousness. The young people claimed they had originally only intended to frighten her. When she no longer responded to address, everyone realized the seriousness of the situation. At this moment, they heard voices, presumably from those searching for Graziella. Under the influence of alcohol, they decided to hide the traces of the incident. The suspect's statements were partially confirmed by evidence. The medical examination proved ambiguous. There were certain injuries on Graziella, but their manner of occurrence could not be precisely determined. The young woman's clothing was in place, which called into question some original investigation versions. The difficulty also lay in the fact that traces of fire exposure significantly complicated the expert's work. The Carabinieri suspected that the group of young people might have intentionally used flames to hide the traces of their actions. The story of the dangerous game that the arrested persons told raised serious doubts. The investigators carefully examined all circumstances of the incident and tried to establish the true course of events. Meanwhile, those arrested continued to claim that everything had happened by chance. The final decision was to be made by the court. Two from the group, Vincenzo and Giuseppe, categorically denied their involvement. According to their words, they simply came to the forest at Pasquale's invitation, without suspecting his intentions. When they saw what was happening, they allegedly left immediately. The young men explained that they had not contacted the police out of fear of possible revenge from other participants or problems with the law, as they could have been accused of complicity. After completion of the court proceedings, Pasquale Tartoro received a relatively mild sentence of 30 years imprisonment. Two factors contributed to this: his willingness to cooperate with investigators and the fact that expertise did not confirm his direct participation in the final events. The four other participants received a stricter sentence. For kidnapping a minor and premeditated actions, they received life imprisonment in solitary cells, without the right to contact other prisoners. The announcement of the verdict caused violent reactions. Graziella's mother lost consciousness. Her husband had to be helped. A verbal altercation arose between the families of the accused. The young woman's relatives considered the punishment just, except in Pasquale's case. In their opinion, he deserved a harsher sentence. Vincenzo and Giuseppe were particularly active in opposing the court decision. They defended their innocence so convincingly that they even found supporters who believed their version of events. However, this did not help them challenge the verdict. 8 years after these events, the 27-year-old Vincenzo Caratello made a fateful decision during his stay in the correctional facility. Perhaps he was tormented by guilt, or he simply saw no other way out. Just a few days before his mother had visited him, the woman still believed unshakably in her son's innocence and supported him in every way. However, Vincenzo himself had already lost all will to continue his path at that time. The mother's heart sensed that something was wrong. She noticed that her son had become distant, had become a different person. And her premonitions proved correct. On the 19th of June 2013, lawyer Michel filed an application for case review, citing procedural violations. He challenged the results of the previous proceedings, but the court refused to examine the application. Pasquale's mother publicly addressed the Mansi family with sincere apologies for her son's actions. She emphasized that he must take full responsibility for his actions before the law. However, Graziella's mother rejected these apologies. Her response was emotional. She declared that Pasquale must go through everything that her daughter had gone through. According to her words, Graziella would have stayed with her family if he had not lured her into the forest. Graziella's parents considered Pasquale to be the main culprit. The name, Graziella Mansi, is not forgotten in Italy. At Castel del Monte Castle stands a memorial plaque with her photo and a brief story of Graziella, whose path ended so early. This place became a kind of memorial where locals and tourists leave flowers and stuffed animals. Graziella's relatives frequently visit this place of remembrance. After 24 years of imprisonment, Pasquale Tartoro regained his freedom. For good behavior, his sentence was shortened by 6 years. Now he is 44 and trying to begin a new life. It is difficult to predict how his further fate will develop. Among all participants, he was the only one who agreed to a simplified procedure, which led to a sentence reduction. After the incident, all participants broke off all contact with each other. Even when Pasquale was released, none of the former friends tried to restore contact. He himself says that he remembers every day what happened and the pain he caused Graziella and her relatives. Pasquale confesses, if he could return to the past, he would act differently. During the difficult rehabilitation phase, his family became the most important support. He expresses gratitude to all who believed in his improvement. However, Graziella's mother expressed her opinion about Pasquale's early release. According to her words, his release has destroyed the idea of justice. She is convinced that such people cannot change and pose a danger to society, which is why they do not deserve a second chance. Vincenzo and Giuseppe, who insisted on their innocence, could not understand Pasquale's motives for action. In his last letter before leaving this world, Vincenzo continued to defend his innocence and expressed his bitterness about the injustice of the system. He hoped that someday someone would be found who could prove the truth, but saw no point himself in continuing the fight for freedom. Giuseppe, Domenico and Michele are still in custody. Giuseppe does not give up his attempts to prove his innocence and devotes his time to Bible study. He has accepted his sentence and no longer files appeals. At the same time, he maintains faith that the truth will come to light one day. All three unanimously point to Pasquale as the main culprit of the incident. According to their words, he lured Graziella into the forest and was the initiator of further events. Nevertheless, Pasquale received the mildest sentence among all those convicted and is already free.